Some of the demonstrations in this video require that you watch it in 50 frames per second, so please select that if you have it available. Cheers. This footage that you're watching right now is processed HDR Magic Lantern video. Now, normally it would look like this, and you can see that it's flickering between frames. You're now looking at it at 50 frames per second, but each alternating frame is a different ISO value. So one frame in this case is at 800 and the other frame is at 100. And what we do in post, we use some software. I've got a Final Cut Pro X plugin to show you and a command line tool as well that I wrote myself. And what we can do in post is combine these two frames together to make another video which is half the frame rate, in our case 25 frames per second, but it has a much higher dynamic range. Now I'll show you what this might normally look like. I'll show you now. Now this is shooting at ISO 800. You will see a bit of noise, but you can see that the highlights are completely blown out in this footage. And this footage here is being filmed at ISO 100. Obviously the shadows are a lot darker. Okay, you're now watching HDR video again, and we're at 720p, and we are watching it at 25 frames per second. Now it is also possible to do this at 1080p, but you will be looking at it at a reduced frame rate. Let's show you that. Okay, I'm now shooting at 1080p in HDR video, and my frame rate is a lot slower. If I move my arms around, you might see the blur and stuff and the result of that, because I'm only actually at 12.5 frames per second at the moment. Full speed, it'll look like this. It's all flickering at 25 frames per second. But going back to the HDR video, you can see that the noise is substantially reduced as well. That's because I'm able to shoot at a longer shutter speed as well. I'm at 1/30th of a second rather than the 1/60th of a second that I was shooting at with the 720p footage, with that faster footage. So I'll let you make up your own mind as to which footage looks better. So I'm going to demonstrate various ISO values and the Alex4D Final Cut Pro X plugin and a command line program called Enfuse, which I've made into a script to handle movies. Flat just refers to the sign style profile that I'm using for the colour and contrast. My personal preference is using Enfuse, and the script that I wrote, I just find it a lot quicker, easier, and it produces much more natural results. And the best results I got was this clip here of one of the cafes in town. It's got the bright sky and lots of shadows and stuff, and it really showed the advantage of using HDR video. Okay, so we'll quickly go over the settings on the back of the camera here. So I'll show you the menus that you need to activate. Now, EOS M, it's a 2-finger tap to activate the Magic Lantern menu, and it's under the movie setting, and it's down here, HDR video, and you just need to turn that on there. We can go into it a bit further, and we can see our two ISO values. We've got ISO A, in our case is 100, and ISO B, which is 800. Now, typically for me with the EOS M, I normally don't shoot much above ISO 400. So normal use, I'll never really shoot above ISO 400 just because of the amount of noise this produces. And I guess that'll be the same with things like the T2i 650, which has got pretty much the same sensor as this thing. But if you're on, say, a 5D Mark II, then this dual ISO thing will probably be a lot more useful. So it's just a matter of turning that on there, and then whatever video settings you have, we'll just have a look now. Right now I'm on 1920 by 25, okay, and whatever video settings you have, and when you start recording, you will see that on the screen as it's going to be recorded. You can see it flickering there on and off. Hopefully that doesn't put you into an epileptic fit, but you can see that flickering there on and off. Now also, we might want to record at 1280 at twice the frame rate, and then we can you'll get a much more natural looking video when after you've processed it in post. So if you're actually doing someone talking or live action sort of thing, you want to be shooting at 720p so you can get that full 25 frames per second once you've processed the whole thing. Now another thing I found, currently it's a bug, I'm sure they'll fix it. I'll put in the comments below if they do fix it, but you might typically want to shoot at 30 frames per second, so I'll put the video system into NTSC, and at 1280 at 60 frames per second, I'll start that recording now. You will see every now and then it just hesitates a little bit, see it there? 1 or 2 frames are either, you get 2 light ones or 2 dark ones. I'm not sure why this is. That may just be the difference between the 29.97 frames per second and 30 frames per second, and someone's overlooked that difference and there's a bit of a bug in there. I know that most of the Magic Lantern guys like to shoot in 25 and 24 frames per second, so this may be why this bug slipped through. So another reason why I don't use this, because I like to put all my footage in 30 frames per second. But I'm sure that'll get fixed in the future, and once it does, I'll put it down in the comments. Basically makes it useless because you'll get entire dropped frames when you're making it. But you can still record 1920 by at 30 frames per second, so you get a resultant 15 frames per second as your raw footage that comes out of that. Oh, sorry, as your processed footage. So they're the settings there. We'll just go back into it. So just to summarize, you want to turn it on here. You want to be in video mode, of course, with live view activated and all that. And you've got your 2 ISOs you can set. Typically, you want to set something like 100. I think the default is 800. That's what they recommend. I shoot sometimes at 400, but it really doesn't give you that much of an advantage. Honestly, just using the flat profile actually gives you quite a 2-stop advantage already. And apparently just shooting at 100, 800 gives you an extra 3 stops. So both of those combined, I'm not sure, maybe it'll reduce it a bit. I don't think you'd get a 5-stop improvement, but it is an improvement, however, even though you have that trade-off with resolution. Okay, so now we'll go to the computer and I'll show you how to process the Magic Lantern HDR video. For the beginners, the easy way is if you've got Final Cut Pro X, there is a plugin out there which is pretty much a drag and drop solution, which is really good. So I'll show you that one first. For the more advanced users, there's a way to do it manually. I've made a script for it. It's still a bit of a prototype, but I'll show you my command line script, which pretty much does the same thing. Let's go. So this is the page with the Alex 4D Magic Lantern HDR effect, and I strongly recommend that you have a look at this page and read the instructions. It's a bit more in detail as to what I'm about to show you. I'm just going to show you the very basics, but the download is here, disk image, and there's instructions there on how to install the plugin. It is editable in Motion as well if you have those skills. Anyway, let's do that. We're going to use, I'm going to go through one of the clips which you saw before. Let's drop this clip in here, which is a good example. First thing you want to check is that your frame rate is correct. I'm advancing frames 1 by 1 here, and we're slightly out. I did record this at the wrong frame rate, so what you need to do is to fix that is to go to this retime thing and select automatic speed. Now it's going to play back slightly faster speed as what we played it back as, but the most important thing is as we advance each frame, it's blinking on and off there with our different ISO values. Okay, so now we can apply our LX4D effect. So I'll put it here, drag that on. And the first thing we need to select is to select the correct project frame rate. In our case, this project is 50 frames per second. Alright, now we can start messing around with the settings over here. Now, usually the first thing I like to do is just reduce the Luma high a bit. And I'll put up the high smooth as well. Now for me this effect isn't really that realistic, but okay, so I'm pretty happy with that, and now I'll go and we'll just do a little bit of color correction. We've got a very flat image there, and if I remember right, I don't want to lose all my shadows. The only trouble with this LX4D plugin is it's very slow. I've got a slow system anyway, I don't have an SSD or anything like that, but it's every adjustment you make it starts to re-render this, and even if you put an extra bit of text over the top, it'll re-render the whole thing. So once you get something right, it's good to export the whole thing and then sort of save it and then drop it back into your project if you're going to put other effects over the top. Now one thing it doesn't do very well is these edges and these transitions. There we go, let's go with that. Now I'll let that render. Now another thing to note, if you're having trouble with making this work, it can be an idea just to drop the first frame, because it sort of depends on which one is the bright one, whether the odd one is bright or the odd one is dark. So if you're having any trouble, or if you've shortened the clip and then you apply the effect, you might find you just need to cut one frame off the front there to make it work or not work. There are ways around it in the settings here, in the actual effect adjustments there, but you probably want to go back to the web page and really have a close look at those instructions for how to do that. Okay, so that's rendered and we can play that back now and see what it looks like. Not bad, I'm fairly happy with that. Now of course, a lot of this is personal taste and everything, so you really need to try this out yourself and try out all these settings. But the most important thing is to make sure that you've got the alternating frames playing back correctly when you drop the clip in first, and using that retime automatic option, and that will conform your clip correctly to whatever frame rate you've got your project at. And then you want to select your project frame rate down here, and from there then you can start adjusting things. And if you're having trouble, just remove the effect, take off the first frame from the clip and then apply it again, and then see how you go. Right, I'll show you now. I'll just open that clip up in Finder. There we go, we've got it there. This is the clip that we were just working with. I'm just going to make a copy of that and put it in this empty folder so I can show you how my little script works instead. Okay, so I use a little program called CD2, which moves whatever directory you're in Finder, it'll open up a command line in that directory, nice and quick. Saves you navigating around with the ls command. Now this uses a command line program called Enfuse, and that's got its command line program, and it can do other things like focus stacking as well, and the whole purpose is to combine images together. In our case we're just going to do 2 images at a time, but it can do 3, 4, 100 even. Okay, I've used it to average 100 frames together to reduce noise. Now the script I wrote is just a wrapper around that, and I've called it combine frames.sh, and it's got a few different options. So if you just press enter on the script, it'll list the options first. And what we want to do, we want to use Enfuse, and then we want to do it on 2 frames. So we want to combine 2 frames together, and we want to specify a movie file for it to work on. This program will also work with lists of images as well. And now what it's going to do, once I press enter, it'll just check those settings. It takes advantage of however many cores you've got on your computer. FFmpeg uses multiple threads, but Enfuse itself doesn't. So what it does, it splits up the task and then runs Enfuse multiple times to make the whole process quicker. Now, so we've got Enfuse selected, 2 frames, there's our movie, running on 8 cores. Press enter to continue. So what it's doing now, it's taking that movie and making it into individual image files, high quality JPEGs, so it doesn't take up too much room. And now it's actually infusing those frames together. So it'll create a whole bunch of files in that directory, so it's good to run it in its own directory. So if you do have any problems, it'll clean up. But once it's done, all you'll get is an output of a new movie, which has infused those 2 ISOs together. So we'll just wait for that to finish. Now there's lots and lots of information you see here. I've got each program running on debug mode, so it puts out probably an excess of information, but at least you know it's still working. Alright, and once it's done, it will open the file that it's generated, and we can play that back. And with a bit of color correction, this should look really nice. So that's our resultant file. And just to show you what it outputs, I like to put a lot of information into the file name. So I've got the original file name, and then I've tacked on the end what I did to it. In this case, combined 2 frames, infused. It auto-detected the frame rate and then regenerated this at that frame rate, but you can also override that frame rate with FFmpeg if you like. Anyway, so now we'll drop that into Final Cut Pro. I've actually got that same clip already in my event library because I did it beforehand, and I'll drop that clip in. You'll notice it is a sort of an odd length compared to the rest, so because it is at 29.97, so we'll do that automatic speed trick again, and that's shortened it a bit. Because my script works a bit differently, it takes the 2 images and then combines them to 1. This is going to play back twice as fast as the original, so I'll make that into a new compound clip. Let me move my head here, and then I'll retime that to 50%. So now it's the same timing as the other one. Cut it there, disable that one. Now we'll do a little bit of color correction. I actually color corrected this before in the clip you saw earlier, so let's just find that one. Where did I put it? That's the one. So I can actually really love this. I've copied that. Go back to our clip. Shift Command V and just paste my color options. Done. So that was the color correction that I was happy with before. Have a look at them. Similar adjustments to what I did to this clip as well. It's just what I ended up doing with the flat profile. Anyway, we can now look at them side by side. this has got its own style to it. It's got its own, you know, full-on HDR, while the script I use looks a lot more natural. That's my opinion anyway. Anyway, that script is still a bit of a work in progress. I will do another video on it once I finish it and I've made it all idiot proof. But if you are interested in it, let me know in the comments below that you're interested. It does do quite a bit more than just this dual ISO function. And I should say also, with a bit more work, it will have the possibility of working on Linux, obviously, OS X, and I hope Windows, with a little bit of work under, say, Wine and Bash or something like that. But it should be possible to make it work under Windows as well. Okay, that's the basics of Magic Lantern HDR video. There are some more advanced settings where you can actually make it change the shutter speed between frames and do changes over 3 or 4 frames even, but I'll do that in another video on advanced Magic Lantern HDR video. Anyway, please subscribe and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.